It's been quite the buzzword of the past decade. It is usually related to another word, family. Dysfunctional families have been identified as families that do not work right. The church is known as the family of God, and often local congregations get a similar label. This label has produced a myriad of research projects and professional opinions, not to speak of the guilt produced and pressure on families and churches. Dysfunctional families have been labeled as such because one or more family member is a drunk, abusive, or an addict. Some dysfunctional families have been labeled such because a child has an eating disorder of some kind. Some churches and families have been labeled this way because there's too much fighting or not enough fighting, or because everyone is distant and unengaged. Some are labeled in this way because one parent or leader is missing or absent for one reason or another. There is no such thing as a functional family. A functional family is a perfect family, a family with no strife, no problems, no arguments. Everything is perfect in that family. Well, there's nobody perfect. Therefore, there cannot be a functional family. So having a dysfunctional family implies that there is such a thing as a functional family. There is no either or. Therefore, you have functional times and dysfunctional times. Now, what does a functional family look like? It would seem logical to assume that it is the exact opposite of a dysfunctional family. It's a kind of Leave It to Beaver type family. Both parents are fulfilled and happy. All of the 2.5 children are finding fun and joy in school and in their friendships. Now, not everybody finds school fun. And not everybody has a perfect friendship, because if everybody had perfect friendships, then everybody would be best friends. But it's not like that. On top of all that, they're good students. Everyone eats all their meals together every day, and there are no fights at the table. They enjoy all family functions together, fishing, watching a movie, going roller skating, you name it. They never complain about anything. When they do have conflicts, which will inevitably happen, they resolve through meaningful conversation and coming to some kind of beautiful agreement where all parties gain something. There are not always meaningful conversations with discipline. With most people, you can't just talk to your child and they're just perfect. Everything's just perfect now. So, are we rolling our eyes yet? If not, we should be. There is no such thing as a functional or dysfunctional family or church. There is no either or, because one family is supposed to be one to have the other. Every family and church will have functional times and dysfunctional times. Most family units cannot be either one or the other all the time. We are human beings capable of greatness. We are human beings capable of greatness and horrible acts of selfishness. We all demonstrate those kind of things at one time or another throughout our entire lives. One moment we are stomping our feet and screaming that if mommy doesn't give us that ice cream, we're going to throw ourselves on the floor. Another moment, a father sacrifices a great job advancement to keep his kids in the same school, or a leader makes a sacrifice to save an organization. We are all capable of function and dysfunction. So the question remains, how is the scale tipped to the functional side of life? Is it possible for a family that lives in chaos to become a family of peace and truth more often than not? Is it possible for a couple whose only pattern of a relationship is constant conflict to have some balance and joy? Is it possible for a church to blossom into a place of peace and harmony? The answer to these questions is a resounding yes. And this is because with God, all things are possible. God has a way of working himself into our daily family life, if we let him. He wants to be part and parcel of our families at home. Dare we say it, even our church families. God has to be in the center of every family, because if God's not in the center of a family, that family is not a Christ family. That family, more than likely, won't end up in heaven if Christ isn't in the center of their family. Because most people need Christ in the center of their family. Most people, there's constant arguments, divorces, one child has no parent, some orphanages. If Christ was in the center of every family, we wouldn't need orphanages because they would keep their children because Christ is centered in their family. So how does God do that? How do we get the help we need from the God who made the universe yet still desires to be at the center of our families and our churches? You must know by now that we can look to examples in the Bible for this great matter. The Bible has answered all your problems. It has answered the family problems. It has answers to if you have a problem with the mental state. If your family just argues constantly, the Bible has answers. In Exodus 18, we'll see a great example of how God can come to the center of a family and a people group, even a family and a people group are supposed to be centered upon him already. The example comes from the life of Moses. As we have been studying the book of Exodus, we have found that Moses was called of God to lead a large group of people out of Egyptian slavery and into a theocratic nation focused on him. Without God, Moses couldn't do that because if God wouldn't have told him to, Moses would have never led them out of Egypt. They would have always been in Egyptian slavery. So, Moses increasingly became a man of courage and conviction through the process. As he led these people into the desert away from terrifying slave drivers, he discovered that they were in need of great leadership. They needed someone to depend on for consistency and strength. Moses was their man. By the power of God, whom Moses loved and served, he led them through the Red Sea to water that was sweet and shade that was restful, through a victorious battle with the Amalekites, won by prayer and constant communication with God. Moses was an extraordinarily obedient man. Moses had a wife named Zipporah. Can you imagine being married to this kind of man? You might stand in awe by his side, watching as God worked through your husband. What a great thing to be holding his hand as you walk together between walls of water. What a tremendous thing to look up at the hills above the valley of battle and see him praying and crying out to the Lord. Wow, talk about a functional husband. There is no real mention of the nature of Moses and Zipporah's family until we reach Exodus 18. We find that they were really the ideal type of family with two sons. In Exodus 18, 3-4, we get a look at what the names of these sons were. One son was named Gershom, for Moses said, "I have become an alien in a foreign land," and the other was named Eliezer, for he said, my father's God was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh." Even the names of the sons are reflected of both Moses and Zipporah's journey, dedication to God. They were completely dependent upon the deliverer. This has to be a truly functional family if ever there was one, but there never was one. Not even Jesus' family was a functional family. They all had problems. Just because Jesus was perfect doesn't mean his family was perfect. Just because he was the only perfect one in the family, his family was built of sinners. There was more sinners than perfect. So, of course, they had problems, and there was probably lots of denial, and there was probably lots of fear, because if they wanted to kill Jesus, they probably wanted to kill his family too. So, after a while, Zipporah may have wanted to go visit her own family. So Moses sent her off. When she arrived home, no doubt there was great joy. I know if I have to leave my family for a really long time and come back, there's going to be great joy because I get to see my parents for the first time in a long time. So, I imagine that she could hardly contain her excitement and wonder as she began to tell all that God had done for them. It was at this news that Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, decided to make his visit. Exodus 18:15-12 says, 15, 5 and 12, says, "And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife unto Moses into the wilderness, where he encamped at the mount of God. And he said unto Moses, I, thy father-in-law Jethro, am come unto thee, and thy wife, and her 2 sons with her. And Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and did obeisance, and kissed him, and they asked each other of their welfare, and they came into the tent. And Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done unto Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and all the travail that had come upon them by way, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord, who hath delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of Pharaoh, who hath delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, for in the thing wherein they dealt proudly he was above them. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God, and Aaron came, and all the elders of Israel, to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law." Could you get a more picture-perfect family event? It is as if Norman Rockwell painted this. Everyone is rejoicing in the Lord and delighting in each other's company. And on top of that, they invite friends over for a great meal in the presence of God. Functionality is so pleasant. When God is at the center of your home, your life and church, great and good things take place. There is peace and joy. There is love and happiness. It is good to put God first. When you're walking around and you see families that are unhappy, it is because they do not know God. If you see families walking around where they are arguing and yelling because they can't make a perfect agreement, it is because there's not God in their family. Even if there is God in your family, you're going to have problems. God knows you're going to have these problems because God wants you to have these problems so he can mold you into the person that you're going to be. The family that he wants you to be, the godly family he wants you to be, he will do that for you. You just have to believe that he can do it. And you just have to put God first. But all really was not well for this family or for the Hebrew people. A large piece of dysfunction had moved in. It was Jethro, the father-in-law, who saw it right away. In Exodus 13 through 18, it says that, and it came to pass on the morrow that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood by Moses from the morning unto the evening. And when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he had did to the people, he said, What is this thing that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou thyself all alone, and all the people stand by thee from morning unto even? And Moses said unto his father-in-law, Because the people come unto me to inquire of God. When they have matter, they come unto me, and I judge between one another. And I do make them know the statutes of God and his laws. And Moses' father-in-law said unto him, The thing that thou doest is not good. Thou wilt surely wear away, both thou and this people that is with thee. For this thing is too heavy for thee, thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. Well, Moses was not alone. This time of dysfunction did not come because Moses was a drunkard or an adulterer or a child beater. It came because he was simply working too hard. Jethro saw the great demand upon Moses. There were so many people and so many conflicts and decisions that needed to be made. Maybe he saw his grandchildren missing their father and the strain on Zipporah as she tried to run the household long into the night. Jethro spoke it plainly. The work is too heavy for just one man. Sometimes the demands of life just press in on us. Our lives get out of balance. Things get too hectic or too demanding. It is then that godly loved ones, be they family or friends, can step in and gently and firmly tell us that some dysfunction has taken over. When the godly counsel and accountability in our lives is ignored, that can lead to more devastating things like addictions, adultery, and abuse. But Moses listened to godly counsel. Jethro is such a fine example of godly counsel. Because he does not just talk about the problem, he offers a solution. Well, whenever you're in a family that doesn't have God that does not have God in it, the kids also suffer because when they grow up, they know no better, they know nothing about God. Because I know somebody that her best friend she grew up with, she was normal all the way through school, but as soon as she got older, when she was 16, she had a kid. Then she had a kid 2 years later. She was going a little crazy, so she went to a mental hospital and stayed in there for 6 weeks. When she came back, she basically was into witchery. Like like in her house, she has a magic room where she makes potions and casts spells. And she told me that the first spell she ever casted was a spell to make her husband completely obedient to her, do anything she tells him to do. Well, her kids have to grow up thinking witchery is the right way to go, when really it's one of the most ungodly things in the Bible, because God is the only one that can do anything. You can't just make whatever you want to make because you just say a few simple words. It's more difficult than that. Whether or not you think it works, that's up to you. But now her kids have to grow up thinking witchery is the right thing. And now, unless God comes inside their body and says, or they turn to God, they're going to go to hell because they know no better. Okay. When godly counsel and accountability is in our lives, is ignored, that can lead to more devastating things like addictions, adultery, and abuse. Moses listened to godly counsel. Jethro is such a fine example of godly counsel because he does not just talk about the problem, he offers a solution. Most people, they just talk about the problem and think talking will solve anything. You have to take action. You can't just, like whenever you say the prayer, you can't just talk, you can't just pray the prayer. You have to actually work. Because I learned at the Judgment House, you can just say the prayer, but if you don't live a godly life, you're not going to heaven. because you can't just get into heaven. Like, you can't just pray the prayer and then for the rest of your life just be the most hateful and ugly person in the world. You can't do that and still make it to heaven. If it was possible, then everybody would go to heaven by just saying a simple prayer. And heaven would be full of hate and full of arguments, and just heaven would be like a non-burning hell. All because you just have to say a prayer to get in. But it doesn't work like that. In Exodus 18:19 through 23, it says, "Hearken now unto my voice, I will give thee counsel, and God shall be with thee. Be thou for the people to Godward, that thou mayest bring the causes unto God. And thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws, and shalt shew them the way wherein they must walk, and the work they must do. Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands and rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties and rulers of tens. And let them judge the people at all seasons, and it shall be that every great matter they shall bring unto thee, but every small matter they shall judge. So shall it be easier for thyself, and they shall bear the burden with thee. If thou shalt do this thing, and God command thee so, then thou shalt be able to endure, and all this people shall also go to their place in peace." Okay. There is nothing quite like the advice of a godly person to help lead us out of dysfunction. Jethro is a seasoned man of leadership. Jethro, a seasoned man of leadership, was able to see the forest and the trees. His advice was thorough, thoughtful, and pointed right to God. We need to be careful not to miss verse 19 and 23, where Jethro makes it clear that God is interested in this overworking situation. Jethro understands that God has some pretty clear directions, or as Jethro put it more strongly, commands. And here is what he told Moses in summary. Be God's representative. Teach the people what they need to know. Get good, strong godly help. Then you make the big decision. Jethro saw very clearly that Moses would not survive if he continued in his dysfunctional way. He wanted his son-in-law to enjoy life, enjoy his wife and children, and continue to be the strong leader he was without burning out. Advice like this is good only if it is followed. Moses apparently had a teachable spirit. He was not too proud to take advice from a loved one. Moses had talking problems. He was scared to talk in front of people, which is why he argued back and forth with God, saying he didn't want to go talk to Pharaoh because he was scared he might get killed. If you do what God tells you to do and you get killed doing it, you still have the knowing that you did what God told you to do just because you got killed. I would, in my personal opinion, I won't really want to die, but if I wouldn't be scared to die because I know that if I do die, I know where I'm going. Most people are scared to die because they're feared of a little pain. Once you're finally dead and your soul goes to heaven, you have no more pain. It's all gone. In Exodus 18:24 through 26, it says, "So Moses hearkened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. And Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. And they judged people of all seasons. The hard causes they brought into Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves." As we continue to read through the book of Exodus, we follow this legendary leader of the Israelites. We see a long and fruitful career as a leader and husband. We also see his times of dysfunction, but he constantly turned and returned to his faithful God. We are not perfect. We are all going to have times that we don't do what God tells us to do. But as long as we come back to God, he will still always be our Father. God isn't just going to push himself in front of you. You have to come to him. On the day of the rapture, that's when God's going to come to you. But until then, you have to control your life. You have to bring your life to God. You can't just sit there and let him come to you. You actually have to do work. Jethro had it really right. If God is at the center of our family life, our church life, and our work life, then balance prevails. Moses got a little mixed up thinking that he had to do it all. He had to learn to let people share his burden, to trust God with others, to fulfill the demands of life and community, and this had to be learned because God commanded it to be so. How is the scale tipped to the functional side of life? We seek God first and in all things. We listen to or perhaps give good, civil, and godly advice. We follow the God of dysfunctional families and receive godly advice and act upon it to exchange dysfunction for function in other seasons of our families and our churches. None of you can tell me you have a functional family because none of you have a perfect family. You all have had problems in your family. Your family has never been perfect. Maybe you guys have a functional moment, and for that moment you think you guys are perfect, but never is it ever really perfect. Only God can make something perfect. You can try your best to make it perfect, but it won't be perfect because you will always have problems. Trying to make it the way God wants it to be is a pretty good thing, but it's never going to be exactly the way God wants it to be. How can you get along with brothers and sisters? Sometimes sibling rivalries can make you wonder if brotherly love is an oxymoron, a contradiction of terms. But here are some tips that can help you promote peace. Not all of us have always got along with our brother and sister. We may think we have, but we haven't. Like growing up, if your mom pours you a drink and your sister has a little more than you do, it's a big problem right there. And if you are asleep, if you go to sleep and your mom and your sister play a game, it's a big deal because your mom never woke you up to play with them. You name it, we fight about it, said a 14-year-old boy named Jeff. He was responding to a question from Nancy Samalin, a counselor and family life expert. Amanda, also 14, answered this way. Lately, we don't fight very much. One of my sisters doesn't know how to keep her mouth shut. We have different opinions on different subjects and different personalities. That is me and my sister all the time. We never agree on the same thing because we are two different ages. It's very hard to agree on the same thing when I am doing certain things that she can't do because she has no idea what it is. But it's hard because it's hard to have somebody that's half your age and try to be their best friend because it's really hard. And Edward, 13 years old, summed up his feelings about having brothers and sisters this way. 99% of the time it's extremely annoying, but sometimes it can be quite useful. It's really hard to have a sister that's half your age. And it's also hard to have a sister that's twice your age because they are at a higher level than you are and a lower level than you are. It's hard to be in the middle because if you're in the middle, that's like saying if she's watching TV in the living room, I can't go in the living room and watch the same show she watches and enjoy that show because it is for people that are her age. I can't go in my sister's room whenever I'm at her house. I can't go in my sister's room and watch her TV shows and enjoy them because they're at a higher level than I am and I won't really understand them like she does. All the things that can go wrong in friendship can be compounded in the bond between brothers and sisters. Different opinions and attitudes, feelings of unfairness and not being respected, jealousy and revenge. Revenge is one of the worst things that you can do because instead of forgiving them, you want to get them back for what they've done to you. That's like because Jesus had to die for us, if Jesus felt that way, then if he would have got revenge on us, we would have all been dead. Like, we would not be here right now. Because if he felt that way and wanted to get revenge, we wouldn't be here. And all those problems are what can tear a family apart or sometimes bring a family together. Because if you actually do sometime have a meaningful conversation and actually talk about your problems, then you guys will know what the problem is and try to fix it. Some families aren't like that. Some families get torn apart because of little problems. Jealousy is a big problem because if you are jealous of somebody because they have, let's say your mom goes out and buys your sister a new pair of shoes, but you don't have a new pair of shoes and you're mad. And you're mad because she didn't go out and buy you a new pair of shoes. Just be happy for your little sister because she got something. Instead of yelling at her and getting mad at her because she got something that you didn't, just be happy for her because maybe one day your mom will take you out and get you a new pair of shoes. Added to this list is a fact that while you can pick your friends, You had no choice about your brothers or sisters, or stepbrothers or stepsisters. Whether they are younger or older or your twin, your siblings can be a major challenge. What can you do to improve the situation? I wished that she was a boy. I can't even lie. I wish she was a boy. But I can't change that. And I just have to be happy that I have somebody. Because my cousin, he's an only child. He has nobody to play with constantly. So I could, because if I ever trade places with him, of course he's going to get better stuff. Because instead of having divide the stuff you can get, he gets it all for himself. That's not really a big problem. Because in the end, I have somebody that's at my house. I have somebody to talk to. And I don't know why he doesn't like going to school, because going to school is the only time he really has somebody to talk to. But those of us who have had troubles with brothers and sisters are not alone. Even the Bible is filled with lots of troubled families. Think about the two brothers. Cain killed his brother Abel out of jealousy. Jacob tricked his twin brother Esau out of his inheritance. Rachel and Leah were in not so friendly competition with each other. All of those were really big problems. Cain had to resort to killing his brother because he was jealous. Like I said before, jealousy is a big problem. Just because they have what you don't doesn't mean you have to go kill them because you want what they have. He tricked his brother out of his own inheritance. That is lying, basically, is one of the biggest sins in the Bible. Because not only did he lie, but he stole a blessing from his brother. And Rachel and Leah were in the not-so-friendly competition. One was trying to be better than the other, when really there was nothing really to fight over. Because in the end, what you're fighting for, you're not going to have it once you get to heaven. Or wherever you may go, once you're in heaven, you no longer have that stuff. Then there was Joseph, his father's favorite and hated by his brothers. It even seems he showed off with that special colorful coat and the dreams he told them about that showed Joseph coming out on top. His older brothers got back at him, but good. He ended up spending 13 years as a slave and prisoner. He ended up spending almost my age being a slave. I can't imagine being a slave. I have to clean my room, and I think that sucks. But he had to do lots of work for other people, and if he didn't do it, he got a beating like that because he didn't do it. Luckily for him, God had his back. God blessed him. God gave him favor in the sight of his keeper. All this, and we're still in the book of Genesis. We haven't even considered King David's dysfunctional family. Yes, there are lots of places to look if you want to see how not to do it. Here's a quick list of things to try to avoid. Jealousy, attacking, whether with fists, weapons, or words. Cheating and lying, competition in a way to make your brother or sister feel like a loser. Showing off, or getting revenge. Getting revenge is something that at the time can make you feel good, but in the end, when they're the ones that are crying and sad because you've hurt them in some way, eventually that doesn't feel good, depending on what kind of person you are. Showing off, just because you have something and you show off, it can be easily taken away. Competing in a way to make your brother and sister feel like a loser, a lot of times that's because you feel like a loser. You want to make them feel bad because you feel bad. Cheating and lying, people cheat and lie because they don't have the power to do what they're trying to do, so they cheat for it. Like, somebody that cheats in doctoring school could end up, being a surgeon, could end up being a surgeon and having to operate on somebody but not knowing what the certain tools are because they cheated and didn't retain any information. Like Cain and Abel. Cain attacked Abel and killed Abel. Whether or not he meant to kill Abel, it doesn't matter. He did it anyways. Because he killed Abel, he basically committed one of the biggest sins in the Bible, and that's killing people. You're killing God's people. How would you like it if God came up and just killed you because he was for some reason jealous of something, and he just walked up and just killed you and sent you to hell really quick? You wouldn't like that. So, and then there's jealousy. Like Cain and Abel, jealousy can lead to somebody getting killed, some breaking a family apart because that family doesn't have something another family has, and they argue over that, and then the family just breaks apart. And Some of these things may seem justified because of what our brothers and sisters have done to us, but the truth is, they just don't work if you want to improve things. What successful siblings do. There are some things that do work, but they don't always come naturally. Well, having to forgive to your sibling, you don't automatically think of that. You don't automatically think of forgiving somebody you don't automatically think of forgiving your sibling because of some of these things they've done to you. You don't automatically want to forgive them, but really you're supposed to forgive them because the Bible says you're supposed to forgive them, and you're supposed to live by the Bible. But some people don't. Some people, they want to work till they can get revenge. They want to basically spend their entire life trying to figure out a way to get revenge because they're mad or they're depressed because somebody did something. And in the end, that's the person that did that to you, that's their problem. They have to deal with that. You shouldn't want to get revenge